all of us, we all have responsibilities to forge our own path ahead. And if we're waiting for somebody else to do it for us, we will always fail, because nobody will ever be invested in us as much as we should be invested in us. And if you give up 10%, you can never be 100.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Our guest today refuses to let society's rules of aging limit the possibilities of those who truly want to live longer and better. With a diverse career from playing professional football, starring in a number of leading roles for Andrew Lloyd Webber, a career in Hollywood, appearing in movies and working alongside Will Ferrell and Robert Duvall, and curating projects for DreamWorks, working alongside Channing Tatum, he's certainly a man with a purpose. Today he's breaking new ground, combining some of the latest research in neuroscience with training the body and helping everyday athletes achieve some amazing results in their performance. It's a subject I'm very excited about, and a new and emerging trend that could present a great opportunity for the fitness industry. So please enjoy this week's episode with Mr. Dan Metcalfe. Dan Metcalfe, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure.
We've had a very interesting sort of morning. We've had gadgets and brain scans, and I'm kind of a little bit overwhelmed by the whole thing. But there was a question that I had to ask you before we started, and as I was doing the research on you, and Starlight Express haircut. Like, how did that come about?
The haircut or the show?
The haircut.
So Starlight Express is Andrew Lloyd Webber's shows. It was a huge hit in London, and I was lucky to tour the world with it as well. So there were two things. One was a wig. So we had these wigs specifically made, and I would tell you the one I had in Japan, I cried. It was so bad. I looked more like Engelbert Humperdinck than Elvis Presley. So I dyed my hair, and I just said to him, can I just do it myself? So over the months I grew my hair, quiffed it up. And
I saw the quiff, and it kind of reminded me of me in the 80s. So but now you've kind of got the...
Yeah, the athlete side, cleaned it up a little bit. But it was great. Brilliant show.
Very good, very good. So you've had a very diverse career path. We're here today we're going to be talking about health and wellness and brain health and a number of things. But when I was looking into you, it's kind of like football, theatre, fitness. How did that all come together? You know, I don't think I've met anyone there's quite sort of two or three ends of the spectrum.
Well, if I can put it all together, I'm a dreamer, but it's a reality dream, right? And I believe this with everybody. If you really want it, and it's something that you're passionate about, you can strive to achieve it. So I've been a footballer up until 18, almost 19. I'd done 8 years with the Royal Marine Cadets, so I was going to go into the Marines. I left professional football clubs and decided it was time for me to, I just fell out of love with the game.
Who were you playing for?
I was at AFC Bournemouth at the time. I'd been at Crystal Palace as a youth player and then AFC Bournemouth. So that was my hometown as well. And so I started doing aerobics to get supple for mountain climbing, because I said to my mum, I wish I had danced. My mum says, well, there's an aerobics class you can go down there. My sister was a ballet dancer. And the lady there said, well, you should become a dancer. I said, what do you mean a dancer? I'm a man's man. I had the shaved head. I had the muscles. I'm running with 50-pound backpacks on the beach preparing for the Marines. So I did an audition for a laugh, really, with a Lane Theatre Arts, one of the top theatre schools, dance schools in London, and got offered a full 3-year scholarship to start in 2 weeks' time. And next thing I know, I'm with ballet tights and dancing, and found out I could sing and act. And
you found out you could sing and act?
Yeah.
So did you not have any idea about that?
No, I was focused.
Really?
It was sports and football only. There was no life outside of football. So
what about your parents? Did they see any kind of, that creative sort of musical side of you?
I don't think so, because I was so single-focused, narrow-minded on football that on Christmas Day I'd go out I'd either get a football or football boots every year. It was one or the other, and I'd spend all day on my own down at the field just training. So there was never an expression until I said to my mum, I wish I had a dance, because my sister, like I said, was a dancer. And she was, well, maybe you should try it. And I'm like, nah.
What was the age when you had that?
19.
19?
Yeah. So it's starting late.
What did you learn from that? Because we have these conversations quite a lot, my wife and I, about our children and even about ourselves, because our parents sort of, I guess years ago, parents didn't push you and get you to try lots of things. Then it was like you go to school, you do whatever you get told, and that's kind of it. But nowadays, you're encouraged to get your kids to try more and more things. But What do you think about that in terms of this whole career that must have been amazing for you in some respects, that you may never have even sort of asked that question and ended up where you did?
Well, as you know, I was a head coach on the Olympic Development Program, so I work with a lot of kids. So it's interesting you asked me that question because it changed what I thought, because it's diversity, right? Do different things, have sports off season and focus in and diverse training. But I changed my mind. It's about passion, because passion can come and go very quickly. But you should try things when you're passionate or have a curiosity and want to do it. And that was really what happened with me. Was I was so focused on one thing, and when I lost the passion, I went to another area and then became very successful because I had a passion behind it. And then I changed, and everything I've touched has been because of the passion, the goals, the dreams, the ideologies that I've never stopped, because it's ageless. If I can just tell you a quick story. The very first night before I started Starlight Express, my dad went through, he was with the paratroop regiment, he was a tough guy, and suddenly he's got this son that's going to become a dancer. And he took me to see the show Starlight Express. And I'd never seen a theatre show before in my life, and I'm starting dance school the next day. And at the end of the show, he said, "So what do you think?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, this was incredible. I can't believe this." I'm looking around, the actors, they're dancing, they're singing, demigods. And he says, "One day you'll be in this show." And I said, "No, I'll never be good enough, because this is the height, of the West End." And the words that I live by, he said, "Somebody has to do it, why not you?" And that's what I live my life by. Instead of looking at obstacles or reasons why I can't, someone's going to do it in anything. Anybody listening to this podcast, watching, everyone you talk to, everyone does something that somebody else could have done, but they did it. So why do we hold ourselves back? So going back to your question, kids, if they've got a passion, let them do it, as long as they want to.
How do you feel about becoming, I suppose, like you were on Andrew Lloyd Webber, Starlight Express, a number of things. So I suppose you reached a higher level than the majority of people. You must have been in the sort of top few percent. How do you get there and have the mindset of, well, I'm going to get passionate, I'm going to focus on this, and then potentially I'm going to try something else? Because I suppose seeing successful people, they tend to get something, and then they, through the fact that they've stuck at it so long when most people have dropped out, they tend to kind of be in that club, even the people that are average, just through that persistence and staying power. So how do you balance the commitment, the longevity that's needed to be really, really good at something, with following your passion, where you're in football, then you're in theatre, and then you go on to do something else?
Let me throw this back at you a little bit. When someone climbs Mount Everest, they don't see the journey up, they look at the peak and they say, "That's what I want to go." And then they do all the training, but they never lose the vision of the peak where they want to go to. And so I had no idea in any of the journeys what it would take to get there. But because I wanted it so bad, because I decided, if I'm going to commit to this, I want to be the best. Now, people say, "Well, you can't always be the best." I'll be there with Michael Crawford, the Phantom, and we're doing singing lessons next to each other and stuff. But again, going back to the coach, I say to people, you can only be the best you can be by trying to be the best. So if I said to you, how good you go, "Oh, this is the best I can be," how do you know? Because we only know the level that we've achieved. But if I try and reach the highest level, that will allow me to be the best I can be. So I always kept vision on the peak, and everything that happened along the way, the journey I had to take, was just part of the journey to get there. So I never got stuck. "Oh, I can't do this, I can't get there. This is just what I need to learn." So I think, like you said, it's a mindset. And I say goals, dreams, passion, and refusing to give in. Because, of course, we all have days where I kept a diary for a year in dance school, a day-by-day chapter diary. And I go back, and ballet was the hardest thing for me. And I look back and go, there were times I wanted to quit. But the goal has to be greater than the effort it takes to achieve it. Otherwise, we'll quit.
Introducing the next big thing in functional training, the Escape Barrow, a revolutionary training tool that combines a loaded farmer's carry with a sled push to develop hip, grip, and core strength. Developed in partnership with Pete Holman, inventor of the TRX Rip Trainer and Nautilus Glute Drive, the Escape Barrow can be rolled, pushed, dragged and carried. The Escape Barrow packs a punch with an impressive low capacity of 440 pounds, and with a 2-stage galvanized paint covering process, it's also ideal for outdoor use. So head over to escapefitness.com/barrow. That's escapefitness.com/barrow to find out more. Enjoy the rest of this episode.
How do you keep that goal in the front of your mind? Because maybe that is part of where people lose their way a little bit, is maybe they sort of forget to look at the peak or sometimes forget actually what kind of peak are they going after. So how obviously it sounded like your dad must have said something that gave you the confidence that you could be on there, and maybe that was part of that. Yeah, I am going to be there no matter what. But how have you balanced that sort of focusing on the goal, but also sort of focusing on the little goals to get to the big one?
So I have a saying, every level has its own devil.
I like
right?
that. Yeah.
Every level has its own devil. Let's go back to video games, because everyone can understand that. You play a video game, it's level 1, you can't get to level 2 because there's that one thing at the end. And eventually you beat it, get to level 2, and eventually you get level 3, level 4, level 5. Then you go back to level 1, you're like, oh, this is so easy, it's boring. Life throws these lessons at us, so I look at everything as a lesson. If I want to get to the next level, what is the lesson that I have to learn to then defeat the devil so I can move on? So I'd look along there. And so that was part of it. So when challenges came along, it wasn't a roadblock, as I said before. This was, what's it trying to teach me that I'm refusing to learn? And once I accepted that life or this profession is teaching me that, then I opened up to learn, then it was no longer a block anymore.
Are there any big ones that you sort of remember that were bigger devils to overcome that took a bit of time?
I think there's always financial.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't grow up with a lot of money. And so it was making sacrifices, saying I knew that if I wanted to become successful in show business, I had to commit 100% to it. So I rented a cupboard under the stairs at £10 a month. So I didn't have to go and work an evening job, because I could just go and get the money quickly to cover that. And then I would be first in the college in the morning, last at night. I'd be asleep by 9 o'clock at night. I'm up at 5 in the morning. Didn't eat probably as well as I should have. But I take this back to, people say we have choices in life. Right? I can decide to do this or I can choose to do this. I kind of took that back, and when I speak on the speaker's circuit, I talk about that we don't have choices in life. Very controversial, because people would tell me, of course I have choices. I go, yeah, I choose to get up in the morning, I choose not to get up in the morning. These are what I do. I look at it as choices of ego. Because when I make a good choice and things are going well, it's because I made that, I took that step, and so I'm great. But when I make a bad choice, my ego blames it on something else. I knew I was right, but I'm going to blame it on something else. I turn it around and call it character. So now you're into fitness, right? You love health. This is your passion. Even when you don't want to go to the gym, you still go there. Not because it's a choice at that moment. Your character says, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. So the reason I think a lot of people fail is they're not setting their character for where they want to go. It's pretty heavy when you look into it. And I've had so many people argue, oh, of course we have choices. And as we talk, I've seen them turn around where people that have been trying to give up smoking for 30 years have given up that day because they said, actually, I am in control. Who am I? What do I really want? And if they can do that and commit to who they really want to be, choices are no longer an option. If someone puts cocaine down on the table in front of you, are you taking it? Not because it's a choice. Your character is set. And once you do that and you commit to that in life, if I want to have a great relationship, I will commit to that relationship. If I kind of waft in and out, it's not a choice, it's a lack of character in what I want.
What about people who don't know what they want? We're going through this with our children. We've got jiu-jitsu, that's sort of in them. My son's very good, and they like it. My daughter's doing it because it's a good thing for her to do, and probably being more pushed by her parents, I suppose, in some respect. But she's still definitely searching. She's got that creativity thing like you have. So how do you, either with yourself or with children, help them to find out what, uncover that passion? And have you found there's a way to do that?
I think it's freedom. And again, like you said, when I was growing up back in England, my parents hardly ever came to a football game. It was up to me to get out, get on the bike and go myself, come back. Maybe they'd ask how it was, and maybe I'll tell them or not. I don't know. We were very individual in those days. And I think nowadays, again, working in the soccer world, it's very much driven by the parents. So the kids don't have the time to make it a passion for themselves, or they fall in love with it because Dad's a Chelsea fan, so I'm a Chelsea fan, right? My dad loves baseball, so I love baseball. And we go through till we hit a certain point where we realize it's not our passion. So I think freedom, giving the kids time, because again, our character isn't set till we know what we want. So give them the freedom to find what they want, and then they'll commit to it. And then you can change because you suddenly fall out of love with it. But the character you build to be committed to health and fitness, committed to other people and their health and fitness, that's who you are. And when you tap into who you really are, that's where you don't have to waver.
And when you're on that journey, when you think you've found that thing, whether it's a career or a passion or whatever, what are your thoughts on sticking with that? Not necessarily. It's like, okay, maybe I like dancing, maybe I like singing. How have you? Let's put it from a business perspective. I guess one of the things I talk to a lot of people about, and this has come up recently, is you kind of think you find this business that you like, or you're doing it, and it doesn't quite work out. And we know businesses is tough. You hit roadblocks, and then you have to overcome them. And then maybe it's like, well, maybe this isn't the right business, and then they're looking at another potential idea, and so you're sort of getting distracted with things that you kind of think you should be doing, whereas working through and just going through it on one particular area, you're going to have more chance of success because of the knowledge and the experience and the connections, etc., that you've got. And I suppose there's a number of examples, but how do you wrestle with that then, from, let's say, from a business perspective?
There's two avenues I'm going to come from, because there's the one is what's my end destination, what's my goal, what's my destiny, where I'm going, and then the other side is why. Because sometimes we have these passions, I don't know why I loved football growing up. I didn't know why I wanted to be a professional footballer. It was just in me. But when I started looking at why do I want to be there, that was a little different. So was I there because it was the cool thing to do? Was it because it was, I'll be famous, I'll make loads of money, I'd have all these fans, I could get on. Well, I realized I love being on stage. So when I performed on the football field and you got the crowd around, that was a show. Then I suddenly realized, hang on a minute, I love being in shows, but football, where you're relying on 10 other people for your success that may not have the same commitment as you, wasn't where I wanted to be. So then I went into stage shows where my performance was judged on me alone. But then if the actors around you are not performing to the level, then that's not the level I want to be. A lot of things happen through my life which have been gifts. And those lessons I had to realize were preparing me for the next stage of my life. Because I think there's a lot of destiny out there that we're not in control of. It's like, thank goodness not everything happened that I wanted, right, when you look back. But if you start looking and saying, okay, what was the lesson that I learned here? Or what was the experience I gained? Because I wouldn't have survived at the next level without that experience. So again, having the freedom to move. Now, it's risky and dangerous because people go, well, I got my livelihood. If I give this up and I lose my income, my family's affected. What am I going to look for the future? What happens if it doesn't work out? But I really believe that's a fear factor that's put into our own minds, where I've never seen someone that's so passionate about something and their why aligns with their passion that hasn't found a way to be successful. I've never seen it yet.
I think that's a trick, and that's something I was chatting to, I don't know if you know Paul Lubix. I was chatting to him the other day, and that was the thing that kind of came out of the conversation there is having your sort of why and your passion together and aligned. And if you've got something, whatever it is, that kind of crosses over on those, then although you never really know, it's always a leap of faith, I guess, in whatever you do. But that is probably a reason to sort of dive into that gap of the unknown and say, okay, I'm going to go for that. Because I suppose with everything, there's no matter what you decide on, there's probably an 80% chance it's right, but there's always 10 or 20% you got to just that's on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's never been a riskier time than now when it comes to security, job security, and you look at banks, you think they're safe, and suddenly we had the crash back in 2008, I think it was, where it goes down, and yet everyone thought they were safe. There is no such thing as pure security that you can stay. There's less risk, but everything still has a risk attached. So when you accept that, it's no longer a fear, and then you're free. So
you had an interesting turn of events when you were in your sort of acting theatre stage. You had a situation that probably another life-changing moment, I guess. So tell us a little bit about what happened there and how you, at the time, maybe sort of perceived that decision. Because I guess it must have shaped. You must have sort of questioned why did you end up there?
Yeah. So I had an injury on stage that meant that I couldn't perform for a while again. I didn't know if I was going to perform again, and I had a wife at the time, and I was putting her through college, and they wanted me to sign off from performing again for the rest of my life. And I said, I can't do that. This is something that I want to, stay doing. And so I changed my profession and ended up going and coaching soccer. Now, when I was coaching soccer, I had no idea. It was really just to earn money to then be able to pay for my wife to go to college and for us to sustain. I hadn't got a salary in 18 weeks from the show because they were trying to get me to just walk away from the show. So within a month, I was suddenly a head coach on the Olympic development program. I created these teams. I had 36 players over the time that had gone on and played pro. I started my own non-profit organization. I opened my own gym, which was based on movement. And because I had gone through a number of different injuries, and we all get injured, right? You play soccer, my knee goes out, your ankle goes out, you go into show business. It was a very strenuous show I was doing. Learning how to recover myself, because I had dreams that I wanted to achieve, I couldn't wait for someone else to get me better. I couldn't wait for a doctor to heal me or cure me or tell me you can't get cured. So I took it upon myself to learn and discover and push what I could do, which the beauty of that was then I was able to understand how to help other people along the way. So as much as it was a career-changing move, and I did go back into show business, I became Hollywood's experts to the stars, working with Will Ferrell, Robert Duvall, Channing Tatum, just name-dropping, sounding big, and they're all great people. I think because I wasn't stuck that it has to be this or nothing, my experiences went, this is actually beautiful because now I'm so well-rounded in ability to pivot and go other ways, but still have a passion in where I'm going from my own personal experiences. So leaving the show business performing, which I did go back on stage again eventually, it forced me to open my mind to other opportunities using what I'd already had. And it goes back, and I know I keep saying it, where was my passion going to take me? Because I'm not going to sit around and wait for somebody else to save my life. That's my responsibility. All of us, we all have responsibilities to forge our own path ahead. And if we're waiting for somebody else to do it for us, we will always fail because nobody will ever be invested in us as much as we should be invested in us. And if you give up 10%, you can never be 100.
What was the injury that you had there?
So I was performing on stage. We were on skates, the whole thing skating around. And let's just say I went into a wall. There was a brick wall up at the Las Vegas Hilton, and it hadn't been constructed safely into there. And I hit the wall pretty hard, and to the point where I could no longer fully function as a performer. It was a serious injury that took a lot of work to overcome. And it was actually cheaper for them to just write me off for life than it was to help me get better.
How long did it take to get on the back to recovery then?
About a year.
Wow.
It was about a year, and it was psychologically really destructive, which really challenged me as to who I am, what my character is, but I'm a fighter, and I refuse to give in. I will always find a way back because that's the way I'm made.
Right. And did that experience then, like a big part of what you do, and what seems to be a part of your passion is understanding the brain and how that works. So what did that experience in any way sort of shape some of the areas that you were focusing on afterwards?
I think the biggest thing it taught me was to not listen to experts that aren't invested in my future. So my mother's a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor. I have a huge respect for the doctor world because people go into it to help people. But I think along the way and the pressure that comes in, there's not a personal commitment and investment into a patient. We become numbers. And obviously there's great doctors out there, so I'm not criticizing them. I think the health sick system tends to keep us there because it's more of a money generator. When we have the ability, we have the brilliance to heal. So we're born to heal, our bodies are made to heal. The messaging that we get sent would determine how much we allow our body to correct itself and heal over time. And your starting point would determine the length of time. But I'm a huge believer that if we invest in our own health, our future is limitless as far as living with a quality, the Q2, quality and quantity of life have to match. And again, our thought process and freedom comes from our brain and the way that we engage.
One of the things that we did previously, and we're going to get one of the inventors on to talk about this, so I won't necessarily go into detail today, but one of the things that what we found out through this machine is that the brain is almost like a muscle in some way, and you can train it, you can improve it, you can affect how it performs. When you had the accident then, and I suppose looking back to where you are now, like how did you see that affected your brain, how you think, how you're performing, and was that also something that you did as part of your own recovery? Was to sort of find tools and strategies to improve your own brain health?
Well, let me tell you this, because this is actually, that accident wasn't my worst accident. That was, people on stage go through that. After that, I came back, I rebuilt, I focused on physical fitness and health. I became a trainer. I worked at Gold's Gym. I was at Powerhouse Gym. I created my own gym, and I was always given the injury or the rehab patients because no trainers really wanted to touch them. One, from a risk, and two, you'd have to go much slower. You couldn't, really push the body. You had to understand more the inner workings. And so it really gave me an understanding of recovery and help because I'd lived it. But in 2018, I was out on a bike ride because I started racing the Ironman, and I loved cycling. I became a very good cyclist. I was racing on the circuit out here in California, and I got hit in the head by a metal pole at a decent speed. And
you crashed and hit when you came off the bike?
Well, a security guard metal gate came down and hit me in the head as I was going through it. I was immediately knocked unconscious. I was flying through the air frozen. I then hit the ground, broke my coccyx, back of my head, then hit the ground so hard, already unconscious. I had a secondary impact, which broke my helmet open. I was unconscious for minutes. Part of my brain died. I had to learn to talk again. I had to learn to function again. This was 2018. So that's really where my real passion for the brain really kicked in. So the initial injury, which was overcomable, obviously I overcame it and went back to living a full life with no restrictions, really prepared me for understanding the anxiety that you go through of wanting to live your life. Now I was in a whole nother dimension. I'd be talking and I'd just stop mid-sentence and not know that I wasn't talking. And I would actually be talking at this speed, but I had no idea because I thought I was talking at normal speed. So that's where I really started to investigate. My mother, who's a psychotherapist, also specializes in brain remapping. So she became my biggest support. I reached out to other doctors, and they started teaching me, for example, the oxygen that we use in our brain is about 20% of our oxygen gets used up in the energy of our brain thought. So think about it, you've got this whole body, and 20% of your oxygen is brain activity. So you really start looking at it and going, okay, what is the power of the brain? So you got this whole body, you got a 2-pound, weight in your head that's using 20%. And if I weigh 200 pounds, you look at it, 2 pounds, it's 1%. And yet it's using 20% of my oxygen. What's it doing? So I really started going, okay, I've got to recover my brain. I've got a life to live. I'm not a victim. I'm a success story. And there's a miracle inside all of us that's waiting to happen. I've got to get out of the way and let the miracle happen. And that was knowledge, education, and trust.
Trust is an interesting one because after what we've done today, and I did the brain tap, which again we'll talk about on another episode. But one of the things that I feel myself, and I know others do, and I'll be interested in your perspective going through sort of almost like an extreme situation, is that trust side is I suppose trusting you explained on when we looked at some of the computer, the autonomic nervous system, and the way you was explaining it on it, like it does loads of stuff, really. It can kind of controls everything that you do and processes lots of information. Sounds like it's quite a powerful thing. My guess is that your sort of short-term consciousness is trying to process and deal with a lot of information that maybe it doesn't have the ability to do as some of your autonomic nervous system, if that's correct. So I suppose when I went through that process, it was almost like, look, trust that there's things that you're not conscious of how you're going to be able to answer, but there's a part of your brain that can kind of figure a lot of this stuff out. The fact that you're questioning and doubting is sort of maybe clogging that up. And when we looked at my readings, there were certainly examples of how there's not flow in particular areas. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I suppose trying to summarize my question, is it okay? Is that trust? Do you sort of need to trust certain parts of your brain that is going to be able to handle stuff so you can focus on other things and let those answers come through?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. If you don't believe in yourself, the system won't work because you're doubting. I call it a deer in headlights knows it should move, but it freezes because fear or doubt of what you should do creates that moment of hesitation that can lead to death, obviously with a deer. With our brain system, it's a computer. It's the purest form is when you're first born because there's no input, there's no information. The autonomic system's still working, the heart's beating. There's things that we're not conscious of, your blood pressure, your temperature, regulating, all these different things. But if you don't trust in yourself, and let me take that back a little bit. If you put the wrong fuel into a car, you put water in the gasoline engine, it's not going anywhere. The information you put into your brain will govern what the brain allows itself to do. So we know that the smartest people in the world use between 7 and 8% of their brain capacity. Where's the other 92%? Now, some of it you can't access. Reason being is once you've learned a language and you say, okay, I'm going to stick with that language, we shut off learning any other language. And so that part of the potential is now removed unless you decide to open the door and go again. When I get sick, I only know, relative to what I've learned, what can happen. However, the brain is such a brilliant powerhouse. We've got our heart, which is our life force, and the brain that's our power force. When I'm sick at night, I'll go to bed and I'll say, okay, Dan, get out of the way. Brain, go to work. You know what should happen. If you tell yourself, I'm going to get sick, the chances are you get sick. If you say, I can get through this, you get through it. So giving the power to the brain to say, go to work, will never, ever produce worse results than saying, I can't do it. And so the more we understand now through neuroplasticity, with all the science that's coming out about the brain, it's probably the greatest life-changing discovery that we have in humankind now, is understand the true power of the brain. And so as we were going through the tests in there and it's revealing what's happening, we're going, hang on a minute, I didn't know my brain could do that. Or I didn't know stress would affect my brain in that way that stops me. Or lack of sleep. If I don't sleep, it's like taking gallons of fuel out of your tank and expecting to drive 500 miles when you've got 20 miles of gas left in the tank, or petrol, thank you. So understanding the brain then develops the trust. But which comes first, the chicken or the egg? If you don't trust, you won't allow the brain to become. So I always say, go with the trust and adapt as you go. It's fascinating.
Yeah, because my daughter and I, we had similar things, or the test was showing us certain things. And I think the way I summarized it is even to do with the stress, you're holding certain things in, which even seem to be, according to the test, affecting how you even carry weight. Maybe you're taking in energy, you're taking in food, and some of that is being held on because it's not flowing through, like my son's was clearly doing on his report.
Sure.
So it's interesting how even something like weight gain, which everybody fights with on some level is affected by something that goes on in your brain. You can call it stress, or you can call it holding things in, or not letting things through, or whatever. But that is affecting. One of the biggest issues that we've all got or in this world is weight gain. It's quite amazing, and so having. Maybe I guess a lot of us are in the very, very stressful situation, or the world's in a very stressful situation. If you look at every time you turn on the phone or the TV or anything, there's always some bad news to give your brain something to worry about. But it is something I took away from today, and I'm going to work on. Is almost like, okay, well, don't try and solve all those problems yourself. Don't take on that stress and carry it on your shoulders. Is allow your brain to take some of that weight off you, let it figure it out, trust that it's going to figure something out, and as you say, then kind of correct it as it didn't. And that's quite an empowering decision to make, probably.
We're so much more in charge of ourselves than we think we are. And look, it comes down to education. I didn't know any of this stuff until I really started going into it, because I had to save my own life.
Right.
And there's no greater passion than maybe saving your own child's life. But you can't function if you don't look after yourself. And I think that when you start looking at the capacity of the brain and what it can do and how it is in charge of our whole body, if the brain isn't functioning, the heart won't function without the messaging going to the autonomic system to tell the brain to beat. The oxygen levels, the food going in, everything that we do, and I call it the contamination. That's what you're talking about. The world right now is contaminating us with all the different news, stress, pressure, fears. And if you look at weight loss, they'll say, hydrate, don't drink sugary drinks and all the other stuff, sleep, don't stress. All these things are about weight gain. Because what we're actually doing is we're shutting down the freedom of the movement of the body, so the liver, the kidneys, the stomach, the intestines, everything isn't functioning together and understanding each other's processes, because it gets in the way and contaminates the flow, the message going down through your spinal column. So by removing the stress and sleeping and hydrating, which I'm huge on hydration, it allows the body to continually flow in its perfect state. And if you can control the stress that comes in by understanding what is it doing to my brain. That's why Brain Tap is so amazing, and the feedback that it shows what's happening with your brain. You can now understand, hang on a minute, I look good on the outside, or I'm feeling good. What's really going on the inside? And when you understand that and see it, now you can make life-changing decisions because you actually have data and proof.
Would you say that that's, like, you've been in the business, and I'm going to ask you your age in a minute, but you've been doing this for quite some time. Would you say that, certainly from the fitness, wellness, health angle, that sort of stress, and it manifests in a number of different ways you can call it, but let's just generally call it stress and worry and fear, etc. Would you say that that's one of the biggest issues to what people have from their physical self in performance? And when I say that, I'm going from like elite athletes, like we're talking about my wife doing a competition this weekend, to the sort of everyday athlete, the mum, the dad, the family, etc. How would you sort of link that compared to all of those different people trying to achieve what they all are in their own lives?
So I think, if I understood the question right, mindset, is that where you're really leading?
Yeah, well,
to?
Mindset, but I suppose more specifically the negative part of the mindset. Like we all have stress, and I seem to feel, after listening to today, that this stress that we all have in different levels, and some of it's good, some of it's bad, but the bad stress seems to affect your performance, whether you're an MMA fighter or whether you're a regular mum or dad, and whatever your goal is, whether it's winning a fight or staying in shape or performing in a business, figuring out. Everyone says, well, don't stress, but that's easy. It's easier said than done. But being able to remove that from your life, or having strategies or ways to remove that, would unlock a huge amount of people's potential, from athlete to regular Joe.
So I think from athlete to regular Joe is talent, right? And when we're talking athlete, it's physical abilities. I'll never be an NBA player. Even if I love the NBA, I'm not going to be there, right? But we're all made up the same. if you think about it, we'll have neurological diseases, Parkinson's, MS, that will come in and attack our system. But we're all ultimately built the same. Our neurological messaging, the brain, the arms, the way that our muscular structure is set up. So being able to handle the stress will determine the level that your talent can achieve.
Right, yeah.
And so I think that's how I would look at it. So for example, your wife this weekend competing, is she going in fully confident she can win? Or is she a little stressed that maybe she won't? And we know in the fight game, there's no guarantee, but I would say the top fighters never doubt they're going to win. So there's no stress on the winning, but that's if you've done the work. So if I go back to Mike Tyson, when he lost to Buster Douglas, he should never have lost to him in Tokyo back in 1990. But he lost because he wasn't mentally prepared, thinking he couldn't lose. He went, I can't lose. Whereas a winner will go, I'm going to win, not I can't lose. And so I think when you don't take things for granted, and you learn how to understand the stress is negative in your performance. And I can take this further. In top athletes, how much of performance is mental?
Well, assuming that they're all trained the same way and they've got the standard, as you said, and corrected me, and a certain amount of genetic ability, assuming they're the same, then I would say that beyond that, the majority of what they do comes down to their mental aptitude, really, to that situation, I would say.
Yeah, and you could have a much better talented player that hasn't done the preparation and can get beaten by a less talented player that does have preparation. But for me, sports performance is between 80 and 90% mental. Oh. And if you think about it in business, success is still 80 to 90% mental. If you look at athletes that go in and they know they've done the work, I remember when I was a player, if I wasn't fit, I was scared to run and support the attack because I might not be able to get back. And at the same time, if I made the attack, I was scared to get back. So I'd limit my amount of movement in a game because I hadn't done the work to physically be able to handle it. But my mental side told me whether I could handle it or not. Now, if you can turn around and increase your mental capacity and your ability, it removes the fear that freezes. Going back to the deer thing, and we know what we should be doing, we know what our potential is, but because we don't fully trust, which brings in a stress, we now underachieve. Stress is good for the body, stress is good for the brain when it's positive, right? You go to the gym, you lift your weights, you work out, the muscles are stressed, they grow stronger, they may grow in size, and our confidence goes up. So now if I've been bench pressing 240 pounds, and they put 120, I don't even have to worry about it because I know I've done the work. But if someone now puts 380 on the bar, now that stress comes in, I'm not prepared for it. One of the beautiful things is when you begin to understand the brain and realize what stress does to you, and then you use a program like Brain Tap that actually trains your brain, the body then follows the intensity and power that you've created from your power force. So if I can train my brain to lead my body, where will my body go? But if my brain is limiting my belief in my body, how far can my body go?
Yeah, that's kind of got me thinking even more now. So let's come up with another scenario then, because let's say you've got kind of two fairly similar athletes. Let's say soccer, because I know you've coached a lot of soccer teams, and there's an interesting story about that as well. But so let's say you got a couple of teams. There was a story I read about, which is SDSU and UCLA, where they turn things around. So my guess is that those players were probably of similar potential, were they?
UCLA is known to be better.
Oh, really?
They have the elite players that normally come from the national team. San Diego State do a fantastic job of recruiting in the best they can.
So if you've got that situation where there's probably, in this case, one was a little bit better than the other, but fairly similar position, and you unleash the power of the mental performance, are you saying then that as well as the physical genetic capabilities, you're able to probably push a little bit more even what you come with genetically if the other person or team even though they may have a touch of an edge, you could probably push these more if these are not using as much of that mental potential. Is that kind of what we're saying?
Yeah, I call it the X factor, right? Things that you can't train, but certainly things you can teach to train. There's always an advantage everybody has in competition. Being an underdog can be a huge advantage, not a negative. It depends how you approach it, because we have nothing to lose.
Right.
I always say, and I was talking to your wife today, the greatest respect you can give to anybody is to go out there and kick their ass, because it meant you bought 100% of everything that you have. So I'm going to tap into every advantage from my psychological, physiological, neurological system and my knowledge to make sure I'm attentive and aware of every part of my performance. If I go in there and say, well, I might lose, but I'll do my best, I've already taught that negative thought. The synapses in my brain is giving an excuse and thinking a different way that I'm going in there to kick their ass. And if they beat me, it's because they had to bring their best. So I think when we start looking at neurological messaging, which I love, and the X factor, those are the things that no one can put a number on. I can say I run this in 100 meters. That's factual. But if I really want it more than the guy next to me, I will get closer to beating him if he doesn't have the same drive.
And can you manufacture that then, that drive? We spoke about it on the podcast before, sort of athletes that are coming up, like Conor McGregor I've used before, because he's a great example, everybody knows, but when he was young and hungry, he had so much to fight for, particularly in relation. It'll be interesting to see what happens to his career now. But now, I suppose that intense hunger to be somebody can't, it's certainly in the octagon anyway, can't quite be the same. And I suppose it's always interesting when athletes sort of have made it to a certain level and they go back in. A lot of them struggle with that. But do you think you can arguably manufacture that level of mental desire again?
I think it goes back to the why.
Yeah.
So when you look at Conor McGregor and he was fighting and he had this hunger and this passion, there was more than just him. It wasn't the ego. There was a need. There was he had an opportunity and he wasn't going to let it go. Marvin Hagler, when he fought Sugar Ray Leonard, and remember that he lost on points many years ago, and he retired at the end. And they said to him, why did you retire? I remember watching the fight. I loved Marvin Hagler. And when he retired, people were like, why are you retiring? People thought you won the fight. It wasn't a clear, definitive decision. And he came out with the greatest saying. He said, you know how hard it is to train when you're wearing silk pajamas? And I never forgot that, because you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable to excel. As soon as you become comfortable being comfortable, now there's no purpose or drive to have to push yourself. When I would coach players, I'd say, as soon as you settle for second, you'll never finish higher than third, because someone's still chasing first. And so when my teams were in first place, I would say our job is not to be in first. Our job is to create a greater gap between first and second. We became the #1 team in the nation. But we kept driving further and further ahead and not resting on our laurels. So I think, again, it's a mental side that I believe you can teach it if the why, the desire, the hunger is there. I do believe you can take it and channel it. But we talk about today's generation that are taken care of so much more than we were growing up, and they don't have the same hunger or desire in anything out there. It's not because they're not physiologically and neurologically made up to have that. It's the fact that we're actually making it so comfortable for them, they don't have to find it anymore.
In your situation then, do you think it's what you've done? You've got a why which crossed soccer and performing on stage and doing what you're doing now, which we'll come on to. Do you think that having a similar why that's not specific to soccer, but like you compared being on stage in the football field to being on stage in the theatre, but very similar thing underneath it. Do you feel that taking, and I know some of your change was forced upon you in some respect, but do you think taking yourself out of a situation and going into something where you are super uncomfortable, where you're at the bottom of a rung again, and having to do it again is a good thing for personal growth and I suppose to probably get the most out of where you can get? Because I suppose it's so easy, whether you're in a job, working for a company, even in life, to sort of like, okay, well, I've got here now. I've got a great job. I've got a much better job than anyone else. I'm earning some great money. Everything's good. why would you want to change that, but I suppose how much growth is in there. Once you've reached the top, you're not learning anymore, you're just sort of maintaining it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of the changes were forced on me, and sometimes when you leave, you believe you can always go back, right? Because you've reached a certain level. I can always go back. The reality is the world's always changing and growing, so sometimes it's forced upon you to then have to look out. But I had to delve more into my why. So when you look at football, soccer, gyms, Olympic program, and physical fitness and health and saving lives, when I looked at my why, I began to realize I loved impacting people's lives. That's my why. It wasn't football, because when I was a fan, I'm on the side, I'm shouting at the referee, I want to fight, it's the day of the hooligans in England and stuff. The players led my emotions. And so I realized, wouldn't it be great to be able to lead people's emotions? So then when I went on stage and I'm playing the lead, and like you said, earning great money, everything's good, I never, ever saw myself as a star. I'd have fans lined up outside. I had bodyguards in Japan. We had all this different stuff. But I realized I had 2.5 hours to impact somebody's life. I'm telling a story. Because they may have come to the theater tonight, they didn't want to see the show, but someone bought them a ticket. Maybe their dog passed away and they didn't want to, but they've spent the money. I've got to go in there. What else am I going to do tonight? But they weren't passionate about the show. I had 2.5 hours to leave the stage, and they leave the theater with more hope and belief that life can be good. That was my job. So then when I went into coaching, my why was kids had dreams. They wanted to go and play pro. They wanted to play in college. They wanted to play in high school, whatever their goals were, and everyone was different. And you don't force them to what you want them to be, even though you see the talent. It changed their lives. The parents lived through them. They had their fan base. We'd have thousands of people come out and watch our youth games. And they were suddenly celebrities. I'm telling a story. And then that lays on to the health and fitness world, where now we're saving people's lives. And so how can I impact lives? That comes from my experience and knowledge, and I have the gift and privilege to work with people that otherwise would have no hope in the future. So as going from some of those things where you've definitely started at the bottom of the rung when you've moved in those different places, do you think that's also helped you to grow and almost like, as we talked about in the Conor McGregor thing, almost like manufacture that need to work your way up again? And do you think that's applied to you in a similar way? Or maybe sometimes I get a little bored. if I'm honest, it's like, okay, I've done this much. I've achieved my why here. I don't see where I'm going to go that's going to challenge me any further. I don't settle. And so sometimes when I coach soccer, I got asked to coach. I was asked to be the assistant coach of the LA Galaxy. I was asked to start their academy. I'd started my own nonprofit, youth organization. Every team I took started at the bottom. I started at the bronze level, and every single team I took them to the top. So maybe that is a drive for me now that you bring it up, that I love a challenge. I love maybe having to prove to myself who I am by investing in others and helping. And if somebody doesn't have the same dream, they're not wrong. If they're not impassioned to go to a higher level, I'm just the wrong coach for them. So you find people you align. But certainly going back in and building from lower down to the top, it has amazing feelings through the struggles. Because you can see it's easier to go from 10% to 90% than it is to go from 98% to 100%.
Yeah, I would believe that. Yeah,
you see the change, you see the progression.
Yeah, and I just wonder how much of that consistent success that I recognize in you has been. Would you have, if you just stuck at one thing, would you have been as successful consecutively as you have been by moving around and forcing yourself to putting yourself in uncomfortable positions and then being successful again? You've been consistently unsuccessful and successful and unsuccessful, which isn't easy, but maybe that putting yourself under pressure creates what's needed to push us all on, I suppose. And when I say that, I'm sort of saying that to myself as well, and maybe people are listening. Is sometimes the pain that you may go through, or what seems like pain and unnecessary, and you can end up sort of beating yourself up when it's tough, whether it's financial or whatever. It's actually like that's the fuel that you want to get you somewhere.
Well, I've never seen myself as unsuccessful, and I know what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and I don't mean that.
No, and I know you didn't mean it, but the word, if I put the word, like, you have the word love and you have the word that begins with H. Right, the opposite. Yeah. I don't say that word because I don't want it to go into my neurological system, and so unsuccessful never enters into me.
Right.
But I look at it as I'm starting at a new level.
Okay.
Right, I'm going there, or I'm starting something new. Let me tell you how this came about, and this is my cognitive awareness. I used to race the Ironman. I went up and did the Ironman up in Canada, in Penticton. Amazing, 2,500 people, all starting with the Canadian national anthem going off, and then the cannon, going off, and everyone runs in the water. I almost drowned the first time I was up there, because someone came over the top, put their hand in the back of my wetsuit, pushed me under the water. I was close to the front, and now I got 2,000 people swimming over the top of me, and I couldn't come back up, and I thought I was going to drown, and I went to this panic to peace. I'm screwed. And then I saw this little pocket, and this relaxation took me there. Came up out the water, and from that relaxation, I'm saying, I'm breathing like crazy. I'm done. I can't do this. I can't finish it. I spent all this money. Forget the money, the time, the 6 months of training to go in there to compete. And I slowly got my bearings back again. I finished the race, had an amazing race, crossed the finish line, very happy with the time. And I stayed till the last person came in helping everybody to the medical tent. It was brilliant. I walked away and I said, a winner is someone that crosses the line first. The finish line first. A champion is someone that's willing to step over the start line, not knowing the journey ahead. So we all start as champions because we're willing to take that first step. If someone doesn't cross the start line, they're a spectator, and the life's made up of players and spectators. So are you a player or are you a spectator? I'm a player. You'll look around, everyone that you interview, your podcast, you bring them in because they're successful, they're all players. Everybody can be a player if they just step over the start line, not knowing the journey ahead, but know that whatever comes up, I will face it. That's it. And there were a lot of people that day that didn't finish, but they weren't losers. They were still champions because something came along that they couldn't overcome, but they still had that honor of taking the journey.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I like that. Yeah, definitely some things to think through on that one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me your age, because I asked you a couple of times and you said, look, let's wait until the podcast. So come on, tell me your age.
I'm amazing.
Your age is amazing.
I'm amazing. And this is where, and I'll explain why, because it's much deeper. And everyone goes, oh, you don't want to say your age, you're embarrassed by your age, oh, come on, what's your age? We're all age. Having now gone in and become known as the seniors champion, working with a lot of people that have neurological issues, I started looking at, if you asked anybody, if I said to you, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you are?
Well, I think your machine actually told me I was like 34, I think. I kind of like that age.
Most people would say I'm 20 years younger, but I'm feeling physically older, right?
Okay.
But emotionally, I'm much younger. Now, if I go to the doctor and say, hey, doctor, my knee's hurt, and he goes, oh, Dan, you're getting older. No, I'm not getting older. I played soccer last night. I twisted my knee. I'm here to get better. I'm made to heal. So society has now judged us on age.
And it kind of gives you an excuse that, oh, that's why you're doing it, because you, like with my back, I'm like, okay, well, I am 50-something, so. Okay.
So, and what's happened is you've now impregnated your brain to judge your physical condition on your age and not on what's happening, right? So now, if I said to you, I'm 106, what would you naturally say?
Wow.
You're amazing, right? You're amazing. I'm amazing. If I said I'm 19, what would you now say? I've aged badly, right? That's what you would say, right? There's a lot of lines up there. These aren't lines, these are wisecracks. So, so we judge each other on our perception of age. So 60 is the new 40. Mm-hmm. So if I turn around to somebody and said, oh, you're doing great for your age, I said, no, I'm doing great. When we attach age, it also gives a bar of measurement. Now, that's other people's perception and our own perception. I take it one step further. If I turn around and go, I'm X amount of age and I'm getting older, I'm sending a neurological message through my body to my cells. I'm going to retire and expire because I'm not building those cells. I've given permission from my brain and my neurological thought to say, it's okay, my back's hurting. I'm just getting older. So what are we sending? We're going to continue to decline. If I turn around and say I'm amazing, what message is going through my body at a cellular level that goes, oh, I was a little tired. No, I'm amazing, because we know the connection from our synapses through to our neurons, through the messaging, and at a cellular level through our body will react off of what we feel. So if you wake up and go, I'm going to have a great day, you have a different energy. You go, God, I'm so tired, I want to go back to bed. Our body's exactly the same, but the messaging is different. So when you ask me what my age is, I say that because I want to make sure I give the best advantage I can to my cells to continue to function, because we're made to live, proven scientifically, our cells are made to live for 122 years and function fully, maybe not at the same level of an elite athlete, but to have a quality of life. So let's not kill our cells with wrong messaging.
And I went through a lot of training when I was younger, and I kind of brainwashed myself to think about that. And then I started doubting it as I got a bit older. And then you hooked me up to this machine, and not just me, we did my wife and 2 children of very different ages. And obviously I know them and I know myself. And after seeing, and for those of you listening, I guess it's frustrating not knowing what that machine is or anything, but it is amazing how picking up what's going on into your brain really affects what happens to your key sort of organs in your body. That kind of blew me away. And I suppose I used to be quite careful about some of the things I would say, similar to yourself. And I feel over time, life gets on top of you and you sort of forget some of it. And then you get into some of the habits of saying a lot of this stuff. And I'm conscious that I'm saying it, not necessarily happy, but you end up in those habits. And I guess it takes an experience like today where you think, shit, it does really have an impact to start making those small changes to what you say about yourself and how you describe yourself, how I explain about my back. And it's far more powerful than I suppose most of us want to or recognize, I think.
This is where I get excited. So now we're into the interview. Now we've got this podcast going on. Now we get down to the neurological messaging and how we can change our lives by what we're putting in and what we're putting out. That's where I get most of, now I'm coming alive. So it's, again, when you train the brain, and I know you're going to bring Dr. Patrick Porter in, hopefully, and talk with him, because the guy's a genius and he's changed my life. Even though I was a super high performer and achiever, I've gone to a whole nother level, and you got an experience of it today that's going to make you think, and you'll realize everybody in this world can improve their brain health, which increases and improves their physical health, which then increases their outlook and perspective on life, because we're cleaner inside, we're more excited, we don't get contaminated. So I'm so excited that you did that today, because I know what it's done to my life and I know what it's done. I've trained tens of thousands of people. And the ones that improve the greatest, the fastest, and the strongest are the ones that are open to cognitively change their thought process and let the body follow their lead. So again, how old would I be if I didn't know? I'm 40, so why think like a 70-year-old when you feel like you're 40? Get that activated and let your body heal.
Yeah, it's very powerful. We were chatting outside about gyms, fitness clubs, and having, there's a big movement now to put in areas for recovery and massage guns and Normatec, to plug a bunch of my friends there. But I suppose one of the things that's missing that I see that after going through this is, well, 2 things. One, realizing the connection between the mind and the body. I think, I'm sure people have, this isn't new, but nobody's necessarily doing anything about it. And so it's like, okay, if we accept that that's the truth, and that what happens to your body, what you eat, how you look, everything is affected by your brain, then why, maybe we should start considering what we do there. This exercise was a very simple exercise. It basically just shows you what's going on in your brain and your body and how those two are connected, and it gives you a sort of a baseline of where to start and where you can get to. And I suppose it's strange that those fields are not closer together, really. And the other funny thing is, every single trainer that I've spoke to that trains everything from athletes to celebrities, they consistently say the same thing to me. And it's like, you get their brain, you get everything else. If you don't get their head, you can forget about it. So I think that the fitness industry's got definitely a lot of catching up to do to really take advantage of a fantastic opportunity.
Well, if you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, he used to use a lot of, going to bed and visualizing his body, how he wanted it to be. You'll hear him talking about it. If that's the case, you can visualize and then the muscle changes to be the picture that you want it to be. How powerful is the brain?
Well, Frank Zane does it. Like, I don't know if you know Frank.
I know of him. Yeah,
he's like super into that. He did a whole section on our interview about his visualization and his mind-muscle connection, which I guess they've proven now is a real thing. Like, all of these people were doing this years ago.
And that's what's crazy, because we've so focused on the outside, it's how we look. And as long as we look good, we're great. I mean, it's the Hollywood syndrome, right? You come out here, I look great, I'm going to be a superstar. It doesn't quite work out that way. But I'll take it even a step further. The mind and brain are two separate entities. The easy way to describe that, you're walking down the street, you're on the phone, talking to your wife, looking in a store going, hey, that's a nice piece of fitness equipment. While you're talking, at no point were you ever thinking of your balance, your stride, or where you're going. It's being self-taken care of. So the mind is now in control of our thought process, but the brain will react off of what we do, not what we think, until we put the input in, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so now I think the biggest change and the greatest change in the fitness industry is as we train the brain's a form of a muscle, right? It's an organ, it's a muscle. We can train it. We go to school to increase its capacity. Our thought process, our sleep, our reading, our feeding, our nutrition trains it. So if we can train a muscle and make it bigger or stronger or more solid or slimmer, tighter, whatever it is. Okay, I'm getting carried away now, sculpting. Why can't we train the brain? And I'm not talking about just knowledge. I'm talking about strength of the neurological system, where we basically give it a protection around the brain that if it gets hit, it's not weak and soft. It may be a dent instead of a collapse. And we can do it. It's proven now scientifically. And so I really believe when we train the brain, we'll get more out of our training. We'll have better recovery from our training. We'll visualize greater, higher levels, which we would then be able to attain, because there's nothing holding us back off of somebody else's impression or perception of what we should be. We're in control.
You said to my son about basketball. I don't know if you remember what you mentioned to him. You sort of said, how much time are you spending on your basketball, training your brain or something? Is that what the question you asked?
Yeah, I said how much. So if training is 80% mental and 20% physical, and you still got to do the work, but performance we talk about, not training, but performance. How much are you working on training your performance mental side? It's 100% doing the activities and repeating. Another way that I can even make this even clearer, again, based on soccer, I was training 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, and we're doing ladders for agility and making sure that the technique and the form, it's not just doing it, but how can we get better? And I'm trying to talk to them, okay, get your, lean forward slightly at the waist, pull the shoulders back, get your head up, look at your foot, where's the pressure points? And they were just casual. As soon as they said, do it like Ronaldo, they all changed. All of them did it better. As soon as they had an image of what they wanted to be like, instead of, I don't know how to be better myself, which is why we love to find people that we want to be like, that we want to emulate more than, Matthew, you want to be a better version of you. But if you're in the ring, maybe you would want to be Conor McGregor. So now you train like Conor McGregor. It raises your level because we set our standard higher. That's mental training. So separate the mind from the brain, put the right information to the brain, let the brain go to work and lead the body, and the body let it power off of the belief.
You've created a program called 60 Up.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
What is that program, and how does that connect to anything that we've spoken about? Are there connections in that program? So give me, well, first thing, tell us what 60 Up is and why did you start creating it, and then we'll dig into the brain side.
Yeah, 60 Up, never made to release, never made to be a product. Bob Eubanks, celebrity, newlywed game, Rose Parade for 38 years. He was coming to my gym. I had a sports performance gym that was based on movement power. So not going in there, if you need to accelerate, what's the weights we're doing or what's the resistance training we're doing so you move and accelerate quicker, not just lifting weights. So it's very specific to athletes. Bob was falling a lot. And so I said to him, let me train you. He goes, oh, no, you're too tough a trainer. I said, no, I'll meet you where you're at. All great trainers, everyone listening to this knows you don't, take a 79-year-old that Bob was and try and train him like Usain Bolt. So he eventually came over and I said, okay, I'm going to do what everybody does, great trainers would do. You got a balance issue. I'm going to strengthen your legs. We're going to strengthen your hip flexors because you're shuffling. We're going to strengthen your core and you'll be better. Within 2 minutes, I was 100% wrong. It changed my life. Bob was 79. When I put him in the ladders to just walk through or go through the little athlete ladders and just very light, he couldn't do it. So I go, okay, we've got to strengthen your legs. Put your hands on the wall. Now lift your legs up and down. He could do it all day long. Nothing was wrong with the body. So I went, hang on a minute, there's something missing here. It's not the body. I then went back and studied children, babies learning to walk. When you had your kids as babies, what gym did you take them to help them learn to walk? None, right? They tried to stand, they'd fall. Remember that little butt that would be in the air? They'd try and put themselves up. And eventually their skeletal structure muscularly got strong enough to stand up. They'd find their balance, they'd take their step and they'd fall. Eventually they learned to take 3 steps. Remember when you clap your hands, come in, they'd run, they couldn't stop, but they'd jump in your arms. And every parent smiles when you say it because they remember it. It was all these moments of progression. What was happening is the brain was learning pressure point and changes to be able to learn to balance. Now I step, I fall, I step. Oh, now I figured out where my pressure points are in my feet. The proprioception is going back and forward so fast that they learn to run, climb, jump, shoot hoops, go out, do all these different things without ever thinking about it again, because the brain from the cerebellum, where 80% of your neurons reside, are sending messages through up and down. Our system doesn't change as we get older. Your system is still, you've got your brain, you've got your spinal column, you've got all the different extremities on there and everything between connecting them. So why, if babies learn to walk and get balanced by stepping up and moving, do we then switch to weights and strengthening the muscles when muscles have nothing to do with balance? But they got everything to do with stamina, endurance, and then obviously strength to do more and higher level. So when I started training Bob and going, let's go back and strengthen the connections from his brain to his feet and everything in between, in 3 weeks, he went from falling to 6 miles an hour on a treadmill, running up and down stairs, back out playing golf, walking every day with his wife. But the greatest change was he woke up every day excited to be alive, because now he wasn't restricted by his limitations in balance and fear. And the more you sit down, you do become physically weaker. But even more, your brain slows down the connection until it no longer messages what's happening. Think about it. Babies, when they're learning to walk, they're curious, right? They crawl, they're looking, they want to move. Everything's movement. And we know the chemicals that are released from exercise stimulate and increase the brain's ability to function. So, for example, we know with exercise, used to be the hippocampus, which is in charge of our creativity, our memory. There's so much that, again, goes through that. It builds new brain cells. It was believed that after 30, every year, the hippocampus shrinks in size by 1%. We now know that if you continue to exercise, it doesn't decrease at all. You can actually increase if you've had a decrease right up to your last breath. But you have to exercise. So by exercising, you create new brain cells, new neurons, that will be placed into the right areas within your brain, with about 80% going into above your cerebellum. So what we need to do is get people moving. I've had incredible success with MS, with Parkinson's, with TBI, stroke survivors, because they're told to sit down and the neurological messages, the wiring that I call it, is fraying. The diseases are killing those connections. By exercising, you either strengthen them and stop them decreasing so quickly, or we know the brain can create new neural pathways. The way I look at it, a river's going down to the ocean, there's a blockage or there's a stoppage. It creates little estuaries, goes around it, either comes back to the main river and goes to the ocean, or it finds its own way to the ocean. That's how we're made up. And so now 60 Up was created to help Bob Eubanks Oney. But his success was so great that other celebrities came out. Will you train my mother? Will you train my husband, Shirley MacLaine, for a movie? All these different people. I'm name dropping a little bit here because Shirley was 86 and about to shoot another movie. She hasn't given up on life. She's living. Her goal is to win another Oscar at the age of 90. If you understand your body, if you understand your brain, there's no limitation from age as to what you can achieve. But you've got to approach it from a brain-driven improvement, because the body will fail if the brain isn't leading.
And with those comments you've made about creating new rivers of connections, is that now something that's being proved by science as well? And is that a relatively new thing that they've figured that out? Or?
Yeah, so it's scientifically proven. Remember the days when someone would sever a nerve and they'd never move their thumb again? They've now proven that if you put your mind, your thought, and your desire into your brain to then go and say, I'm going to move my thumb again, it may take a year, but they'll begin to have that thumb move again, even though the nerve is severed. This is proven medically, because what it does, like I said, it's like the river. It's going to go and it hits and it's got to push, and you've got to get enough water flow, and you've got to get enough flow for it to get to the ocean. And that may take time, but let me take this even further. I hope you have a great day. We say that to people all the time, but we also say, I hope I have a great day. I hope I get better. If you don't believe, the chances are it won't be successful. So I'll say to you, Matthew, I hope you have a great day. I hope this podcast is great. I believe I'll have a great day, because the messaging I'm sending is I believe in me and my ability to be great or have great days, but I'm not in control of you. So if someone says, I hope my thumb will move again, they haven't committed 100% to the process. But if I go, I believe my thumb will move again, and they really focus, it will move again. It's incredible. And you'll see these miraculous stories. We're all miracles. We've got the miracle inside that's waiting to be unleashed. We've got to get out of our way and give it permission with education to go to work.
And with your 60 Up program, then, are you, because there's a physical component, we've got your products over there in the corner. How are you using things like balance to stimulate the connections to get people moving? Like, is there I suppose on a very simple level, it seems like balance is a key part of what you're doing. I watched a bunch of the videos last night, and talk me through on a simple level what's happening there and how it's all connecting.
Sure. So when I trained Bob, and I realized I had to train the brain and studying children and learning how they walk again, and saying if our system hasn't changed, what do I have to repeat? So we know muscles have memory, we know neurons have memory. If they're not functioning, they're waiting to be activated again. So you'll notice the board in my system, but the board is not the program. The program is the movements that allow us to engage feeling and pressure points and change of direction that the brain feels the body. So everything we're doing is about strengthening the brain and body. The byproduct of that is that our body gets stronger. Now, I have Olympic athletes training on there that want to make sure that their pressure points are at the highest point of engagement, that when they hit the ground, they got the most power that they can push through. So it's not age limited in here, it's for anybody. But we have over 300 exercises on that one board. We have them in physical therapy offices, we have them in gyms, we have them in hospital, outpatients. We have them in probably 70,000 homes around America. And what we consistently hear is people don't know why, but they're walking better. See, it's not a balance system, it's a mobility system. That mobility has to have balance, movement balance. Just standing on one leg is not mobility, right? We found I can stand in one position, but that's great if you're a flamingo, but not great if you want to walk around life. And then we take it into mobility. So we get the balance so you can become mobile, and the strength happens because now you're moving. The results we get, there was a lady yesterday, we get these messages all the time coming through, who should go on vacation, and she sent a beautiful picture of her standing in the ocean, and she said, I got to send this to you, thank you so much for this program. I would normally sit in my deck chair on the beach or stand up, but I couldn't go to the ocean because the sand moves, I feel unstable, I have to sit down, I go back. She goes, I got there this time, and my husband said to me, think of what Dan says, put it in your brain, let yourself feel. She sent a picture of her in the ocean swimming. It was like amazing, because all we've done is unleashed the miracle and said, this is how you do it. Give someone a system that actually works, that's honest and truthful. And again, 60 Up was never made to be sold. It was just to help Bob. The success made it into something that's now changing lives around the world.
And how did you figure that out then? What was the process of, what were some of the key steps that you worked out that by doing certain movements or drills or whatever would create those types of connections?
So again, I go back to studying children and looking at when they would wobble. I'd watch videos of little babies learning to walk and how they'd wobble and how they'd push back and go, okay, look at where their foot position is, look at where their body's going, look at what they had to go through to then be able to figure out what's going on. And no, you didn't tell any of your kids how to put the pressure here, step here, put your foot here. You may have moved their feet to help them learn to walk, or they'd be on your shoes, and you hold their hands as you're walking. But their brain figured it out. So all I had to do was come up with over 300 different exercises depending on your level, starting with the most basic, which is stand on one foot and tap the board and come back down. Tap the board and come back down. People don't realize it's not the foot that's tapping that's working. It's the foot that's staying still on the ground that the brain's going to, where's my balance? And the board, because it's so safe, gives you the freedom to fall sideways and not fall over, because the board will support you to give time for the brain to reconnect. And it's amazing watching people in Dr. Patrick Porter, who is with the brain tap. I identified a balance weakness in him in 40 seconds using the board, and in less than a minute, it was completely corrected. He ended up buying 2 of them and taking them home and using them every day, because he realized once you're cognitive of it, you can allow it to work.
So when you're, from an exercise perspective then, you're using an unstable surface in order to get the brain to figure out how to put itself back in some kind of balance. Is that the first step?
Yeah, well, recognizing where the issue is is the first step.
So if you gave the example of sort of stepping and tapping. So by taking the pressure off 2 legs, putting it on one, tapping, the brain, and then being able to fall over on this kind of balance board style thing, the brain's gradually just figuring out how to sort of just almost stand on one leg, essentially, get that part going. And then are you then strengthening that once they've done that, or where do you go from there?
Yeah, so repetition, obviously, and correct repetition.
Right.
Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And so as they're doing the repetition work, we're giving time for that neural connection and messaging to speed up and feel what's going on. We're actually going to multitask the brain, because while the brain is focused on the foot on the ground that's balancing, the other foot is also sending a message back. I've tapped the board. So now the brain is working on 2 things with the focus on safety and balance. We then build it up into multiple different exercises, both on the floor and off of the floor. But the beauty of the board is that it removes the fear of falling. So when you remove the fear, the brain's now free to function and grow and learn. If I have someone holding onto a wall, that wall becomes their stability. When I take it away, they're now scared to fall. If I have them holding onto a board that can move, but the board, it will save them if they were going off, to give them a chance to try again. But if they're beginning to go...
There's an element of instability, but there's a limit.
But they know they won't fall, so they're willing to risk, because we've removed the risk, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can risk finding out how good I am, because I don't have to risk falling and hurting myself. And it's been... The progression continues on. Then we'll get on the board. So think about it. You're on a board, you're rocking side to side. These are people that won't get up and walk on the regular floor. They've now learned, I'm stronger than I thought. I can do this. Now they're learning to balance. And again, we have multiple different positions of feet. So it's not just spine to center. And you can turn sideways on the board, so you can work forward and backwards as well as side to side, because we want to make sure we're working every aspect of balance and mobility. But now what happens is when they get back on the floor, they go, this thing that I was scared of feels so solid. Why am I scared? I'm better than I've been told I am. Everyone's told me to be scared. I'm giving up my life. No, I'm not. I'm coming back. And that's what makes it so empowering, because it's not made to be on. It's made to get off of the board and live life. We have sorry if I can just say, I have a group on Friday mornings, because we teach 3 classes live a week. And sometimes I do a Friday morning 21-minute run club. It's brilliant. I have people in their 80s and 90s that get on the board and will run for 21 minutes without stopping, which increases the cardio side, which is great for, again, the oxygen feeding the cells. But now if you can run for 21 minutes without impact, but your heart rate's up, now I want to go out for an hour's walk outside. It's so easy. We've given them freedom.
How do the way where I'm thinking about this is that there must be, that idea must transfer into a number of other things that in terms of how the brain and the body work together. Like, because what it sounds like, if you, I'm trying to sort of boil down the key elements, but what it sounds is like in certain scenarios, the brain loses connection with certain parts of the body, and so you're creating almost like these rivers to wires exchanging information, and that must happen in different areas, injuries and all kind of stuff, and then what you're then doing is you're also sort of allowing a certain element of instability in certain movements. So you kind of like, you feel what it's like to kind of go beyond the level of comfort, but not too much. You've almost got like a safety net in certain movements. And then you've kind of got this repetition where the brain's developing as well as the body. Like, can you think of like other areas where that can cross over? Like, I'm just thinking of even kids learning stuff at school. Like, is there any other examples where you could see what you've thought about there, which could sort of cross over in other things in life or in learning or stuff like that? Because it sounds like a core sort of thing that humans, it sounds like a core principle that like human beings will happen to us all different times in life in different scenarios. Have you figured out other areas to use it at all?
I have, and actually Shirley MacLaine was one of the people. She's a brilliant person. I have to train every day on my brain because of my injury. If I don't focus on it and do the training, it can regress. So It's something that I commit to. But when you start looking at the repetition of doing things well, it creates a habit that then can lead into other areas because we're training the brain to be specific. I will say that as far as the instability that goes on, it builds a confidence in you that you can be slightly out of control and still be in control because we can adapt, you can adjust. Yeah. So it could be I made a bad business decision, but it hasn't crippled me. I've made a bad business decision, I can recover. So the idea of being off balance anywhere in life, my relationship, I could have a bad moment in a relationship. It doesn't define the future. It turns around and says, hang on a minute, I need to adjust back because I realized I was the one that was off balance. It's fascinating, again, when we tap into the brain as to what we put in is what we get out. And if we put better messaging in, we have better messaging out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is it almost like, if you take it to the 70-year-old, being able to expand his level of comfort to go from, not being able, just being concerned just to stand and move his legs, to then being able to do other stuff, running. And you've obviously kind of given him this sort of, small rings that have increased. But when you said that about business, it's like, well, how many of us are paralyzed in a way of fear? It's like, okay, I daren't stand on one leg because I'm going to fall over. Metaphor being in business or in learning about how to stand on stage, how to be an actor or whatever. How many of us are sort of stuck? No, I can't stand on one leg, but then almost showing someone, okay, look, you're safe you stand on one leg, you're going to move a little bit, but you're going to do that a number of times. Now suddenly you've increased your circle of, you've increased your ability to move in life and move in this world. You've increased your capacity, and like, okay, now what's the next ring? And it just that metaphor for me hits home because I feel probably a lot of us, I've got situations like this where I'm scared to stand on one foot, because I think I'm going to fall down. So I'm stuck here, I can't go and walk in the ocean. And I'm probably going to be there on certain scenarios for a long time until I either risk falling over, or can I risk safely rocking, Do you know what I mean?
Sure. So when and I'll take this back and using that metaphor, balance training is not about being off balance. And balance training is not about being extremely off balance. Balance training with your brain is, as I begin to go off of my center, can I correct it before I'm cognitively aware that I was off balance? So every time we walk, we're walking right, left, right, left. We're actually swaying our body as we walk, transferring our weight left and right. We're not conscious of it because we're used to being in that position and this position. So it's normal for us. When someone's falling, I don't want them to get to a point where they're falling and they save it. I want them to get to a point where I recognize I'm off balance subconsciously and I correct so I never have to worry about it. Now we take that to business. I make a decision, my gut instinct isn't 100% committed. I begin to go and I go, you know what, that's not right. I make that decision before it becomes a problem because I know now I've had enough time to think it through, or I recognize what I thought was going to happen. I correct it before it becomes a problem. And if it does become a bigger problem I haven't corrected, I'm still okay to recover because I haven't let it go to a full position. That comes from trust, and that only comes from experience. And all the scenes, I've got people 100 years old training on the board. I've got people 8 years old with a genesis of the corpus callosum, where the two sides of the brain haven't joined properly balanced. They're training on it. It's not about age. It's about, if I've done it before or I want to do it, let's go back and do it again and use my experience and my knowledge, because so many people give up on life. In it, not even balance. So many people give up on life because of their situation, and they haven't reached out and grasped the power that they can make the change. And that's where I think the fitness industry is going to go, because as we change the brain and the cognitive awareness of what the brain can bring and getting rid of the negative thoughts, that will become part of culture and will spread from a family member to a family, to an extended family, to a community. And the more people like even yourself today, Matthew, when you were doing something you'd never done before and seeing it, change the way you've already thought. The seed's been planted that's made you more inquisitive. Doesn't mean to say you're going to accept it, but it's enough to investigate, and you'll find out that it is that great, and then it will become part of your lifestyle, and it will affect millions of people.
And I suppose that is life. Life is this constant being out of balance and trying to correct and stay, almost like in the right level, whatever it is, whether it's certain good or bad habits that we have, food, all of them. It's getting that right, sort of being in that right region. I wonder whether, I'd be interested, I doubt if there's the studies on this one, but I wonder whether training in that way also, as well as like training the brain for the body, I wonder whether there's an opposite, if you do certain sorts of physical activity, it can also in some way reinforce confidence in how you look at life in general, do you think?
For sure. I mean, when you look at serotonin, you'll see people that would take antidepressants because they're not creating serotonin in their brain, and that brings on depression. Exercise is a natural antidepressant because it releases serotonin, so you have a more positive outlook on life. You can look at the same with dopamine. You look at the same thing with endorphins. And I don't believe there's one chemical that's solely responsible for feeling better. But when you look at the effect of exercise on the brain, it gives you a more positive outlook. Now, with that positive outlook, how do we hang on to it instead of only rely on it when we're working out? Because we know people that are addicted to working out, they're only happy when they're working out. They go home, the serotonin, the dopamine begins to wear off, and now they're frustrated or they're angry again, or because they need that. By training the brain, you'll understand how to hold on, because you'll put positive messaging that continues that chemical release. Look, the only constant is change.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you tested great on BrainTap was your parasympathetic and sympathetic and your stress levels, where you were able to adjust from being in a stress situation to a fight or flight into a relaxation. We want to be able to work on all three areas. And so if the constant is change, which is, we know, right? Everyone's life knows that it's always changing. How we handle it will determine the effect it has on our stress levels and our ability to be happy.
Wow. Final question then, because as usual we've gone on a little bit.
Thanks.
But it's been very interesting. Escape your limits is about escaping what you believed is impossible and gone on to make possible. What would be a memorable example of escaping your own personal limits?
Definitely my brain injury. That would be because I'd never had a brain injury before, and going to the point where I couldn't function properly, I couldn't talk properly. I tried to keep coaching. I had to stop coaching because I'd get stressed in the game and my brain would actually shut down. I would actually feel myself. I'd have to lie down on the sidelines coaching, not knowing if I'd ever be better again. It was the biggest thing that's ever happened to me personally in my life. And so overcoming that, and now with we have a continuing education units that we're now going through, ISSA, where I'm now teaching trainers and physical therapists how to recover a downward spiral. That for me would be escaping my limits, because I could have been a victim. I don't think I've ever been a victim, because it's just been a lesson. And so now if I can take that, not only have I escaped my own limits, I've now opened up the opportunity from my experience to help others escape their limits. And for me, that's the greatest achievement.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. It's been a mind-expanding day, Dan, and hope I'll get to see you again soon.
I'd love to. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you've got any value from it whatsoever, then please do us a favor, like, subscribe, tell somebody, and that will help us to be able to continue to do more of these and help you escape your own personal limits. Thanks for listening.